What's going on, you guys? Spider Kit Kat here, formerly known as Spider Love. And before we start, I just want to get it out of the way, full disclosure, and tell you guys that this is not a comic book review, as maybe hinted by the comic books in the backdrop. I only place those there to enhance the viewing experience that you guys can get out of this. Everything to keep you guys watching for as long as it takes. Of course, the main focus here are the ones indicated in the description of this video, which are the top 10 best Marvel Legends Spider-Man figures so far. Because mainly, top 10 reviews generate the most views on YouTube. Oh, by the way, when I say Spider-Man, I mean to say the Peter Parker Spider-Man whose life we have followed for the past 60 or so years, 800 plus issues, and 3 Hollywood actors later. But just to make it more specific, I have made a criteria on what figures qualify on this list. So, letter A, he has to be a Peter Parker, obviously. B, must fall under the 6-inch line, which on a technicality means that Toy Biz figures are qualified. C, movie-based figures are allowed. So just a bit of a spoiler alert, you will see either Toby, Andrew, or Tom somewhere on this list. And lastly, letter D, suit variations are allowed. So you guys better stick around to find out what those are. So number 10 on this list, we have Superior Spider-Man. Now, I know most of you might think how hypocritical of me to put this guy on the list, considering he's Otto Octavius impersonating as Peter Parker. Now, that is a valid reason, but do hear me out. While in Peter Parker's mind, Otto has contributed a significant portion to Peter's life once the latter gave him his body back. Think about that for a while. Otto did found the Peter Parker Industries, which when Peter got his body back, he more or less reaped the benefits from initially. But what's even more important to me is how Otto experienced life in the eyes of his arch nemesis, which eventually drew him to empathize with Peter in more ways than one. Now that is kind of confusing, so you'll have to read the Superior Spider-Man comics for yourself. But to me, he is in his own right a superhero, or perhaps an anti-hero at best. But, you know, in fact, Superior Spider-Man has such a huge cult following that he garnered his second spin-off, tying into the Spider-Geddon arc with 12 issues to its name. Which is why, to me, Superior Spider-Man has got to be on this list. Of course, if you disagree, the comment section is free to speak your mind about it. So as for the figure itself, we do have the standard points of articulation as any Spider-Man figure should have. But I do have several gripes that won't be left unnoticed. For starters, the paint doesn't stand out too much. In fact, it has a pretty dull tone to it. You know, if I were 8, this would be one of the last Spider-Man figures I would play in my collection, because to me, it really lacks in the fun factor. Although it does come with web-flipping interchangeable hands, it still lacks the open-clawed hands, the scarlet tentacles, and the wrist gauntlets that make Superior Spider-Man stand out from his other Spider colleagues. Right beside is a custom from Figurerealm.com on what this figure should look like. Oh, and one other thing to point out, you could see that he's a few inches too short of a Spider-Man figure. So if you scale him 1:1, he would stand at around 5'8", whereas Peter Parker should be at around 5'10" to 5'11". So that is one of the major reason why this figure is at the bottom of this list. Taking in the number 9th spot, we do have the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Spider-Man figure, which is a slight improvement from the last, though it doesn't say too much. The colors for this one stand out more this time, and it has sculpted web lines throughout. To me, it feels more like a comic book 616 Spider-Man figure, in fact, more so than the movie version it's trying to portray. Which, if you ask me, I find that to be more problematic than amusing. Back in 2014, you can pass this off as arguably the definitive Spider-Man figure, only to be dethroned by the Pizza Spider-Man figure approximately about a year after. Of course, Pizza Spider-Man is higher up on this list, but you'll have to stick around to know where. Going back, I did notice that after a few better Spider-Man figures, the proportions for this one did not age very well, such as the terrible looking butterfly joints and the very flat torso, which I will talk about more in detail on my upcoming review for this. Coming in on the number 8th spot, we have the Iron Spider Spider-Man from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Designed by Tony Stark to aid Peter Parker in the battle against Thanos, the Iron Spider suit comes packed with iron tentacles that come out of the back of his suit. It was mildly inspired by the comic book version, which saw Tony give Peter an advanced iron suit to give the latter more leverage in fighting crime. And if you look between this 375-inch Iron Spider at the left versus the MCU version, you could see the stark, no pun intended, difference between the two designs, which to me both look fantastic in their own right. But I guess both Disney and Hasbro were equally scared that if they used the OG Iron Spider design, people will either, number 1, relate the suit to Tony's Iron Man suits, or number 2, further drive home the fact that MCU's Spider-Man is just an Iron Man Jr. in training wheels. As for the figure itself, for the most part, the design and proportions are sculpted well enough to compete with the Japanese imports such as Bandai and Mafex. In fact, I really intended to buy the SH Figure Arts version, but decided to go with this instead because, well, A, brand consistency, and letter B, cheaper price point for what is arguably an overall better figure than the SH Figure Arts. And again, if you have any disagreements and violent reactions, do feel free to comment down below. To be honest, I have high regards for this suit, but the only reason I have this way below this list is because, like Anthony's Customs, I want to get the suit variations out of the way to give way to the OG designs because, let's face it, nothing can top off Steve Ditko's, may he rest in peace, OG Red and Blue. Clocking in at number 7, we have the Black Suit Spider-Man from the Craven 2-pack, whose design first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 252 and Secret Wars number 8. Now, I'm not gonna turn this into a comic book review, but for the casual fans out there are two variations to this suit. One is the symbiote that Peter accidentally acquired during the Secret War events, and the other is a suit that Black Hat herself especially knitted for her spider. So I'm not particularly a big fan of the suit in relation to the OG Red and Blue, but I got this anyway because the black suit is integral to Spider-Man lore and ergo an essential to any Spider-Man collection. Obviously, it's just a repaint of the Pizza Spider-Man body mold, but it's Peter Parker behind the suit anyway, so for consistency's sake, I can understand Hasbro's decision-making process for that. What I can't understand though, is why in the heck did they give Spider-Man 2099 the same body mold? Peter Parker and Miguel O'Hara are two different people with two different physiologies, but unfortunately, that is not portrayed accurately in the figures other than the differences in suits. I mean, what in the shock is that? As for the figure, Hasbro has come up yet again with another clever and rather cunning way of milking the fans into buying more Spider-Man figures than what is necessary. The first Black Suit Spider-Man figure to come out was from way back 2016, I think, and for that one, it came with only the interchangeable wall-crawling hands. And now for the Craven 2-pack, this re-release now comes with only the web-flipping hands, but with no wall-crawling hands. Now if that isn't the most devious marketing ploy, then I don't know what is. Because to any Marvel Legends completist you may ask, then of course you're gonna have to have the entire armada of interchangeable hands. even if it means having to buy the same figure twice. Now, as we go closer to the cream of the crop, the OG red and blue suits become more prevalent, such as the case for the Raimiverse Spider-Man suit, which is still technically not the 616 comic suit, but it definitely drew inspiration from that suit. Wow, I used the word suit way too many times there, but it is what it is. It's an OG-inspired red and blue suit, though not technically the real thing. Regardless, you gotta love how Raimi took the original design and made this costume into something completely autonomous from the 616. Of course, Raimi could have done better with a black symbiote suit, honorable mention by the way, but we're not here to talk about that. Speaking of the figure itself, it does come with a pretty hefty amount of articulation for something made 16 years ago, back when I was only a kid. This whole figure right here was way too early for its time, and you can even see brand new Spider-Man figures drawing inspiration from this. In fact, it surprises me how this was being sold to kids back in the day, because this figure is an entry-level collector's item that every Spider-Man collector should have. If this happens to be a part of your childhood toys, consider yourself lucky, because this figure sells for no less than $20, coupled with the fact that this is a rare item to find. By the way, what this figure lacks for an ankle pivot, it makes up for the fact that everything about this figure has been sculpted to the most minute detail. The web lines are sculpted all throughout. The legs can definitely do a full 180-degree split. And heck, you'll find even the fingers of the hands are separately articulated. Indeed, no stone has definitely been left unturned on this one. If you guys are still here, I want to thank you guys for watching the whole thing. I will be making the part 2 of this top 10 series sometime this year, but definitely no sooner than September, cause the NYCC Spider-Man has yet to be delivered to my doorstep. And I think it's really more of a no-brainer than a spoiler alert that the NYCC Spider-Man is somewhere at the top 5. So it's best to subscribe and hit the notification bell, cause once the figure does come around, I will be doing the unboxing and resume doing the other half of the top 10. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please hit like and do leave a comment down below. Again, this is Spider Kit Kat, formerly known as Spider Love. Thank you and God bless. Vindicated! I am selfish, I